like to share a little bit about INCIGHT. Our mission is changing hearts and minds, leveraging obstacles, and unlocking potential. We do this through our education and employment programs, which focus on helping individuals with disabilities and barriers. If you'd like to learn more about our programs and services, you can visit our website, which is insight.org, or you can give us a call. Jobs Now is a component of our employment program. And one of the ways we support job seekers is through these GetAhead events, which are standalone workshops designed to help individuals of all abilities with valuable tools and resources for their job search. To explore past workshops focused on essential job seeking skills, you can visit our website, which is jobsnow.org, and click on the GetAhead tab. So INCIGHT also hosts in-person job fairs, and our next job fair is on Tuesday, February 24th in Hillsborough at Hidden Creek Community Center. Registration for this event is currently open on our website and through Eventbrite, but I will be sending out advertisements for this job fair within the next week here. So today, our workshop is titled, I Am Invisible No More, Navigating the Job Search with Invisible Disabilities. And it is my honor to introduce Wayne Connell, founder, president, and CEO of Invisible Disabilities Association. This is a global nonprofit focused on changing the way the world sees disabilities. So welcome, Wayne, and I will now hand the workshop over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Grace. It's great to be here today. And let me share up my screen here and make sure we're all good to go. It looks like I can see it. Can we see it? Everybody else see it? You know, somebody's okay. Thumbs up. Great. Got a thumbs up. I appreciate that. Yeah. So, welcome to our presentation today. We're going to focus on, as mentioned, job seekers with invisible disabilities. And our theme is I Am Invisible No More. This is actually our theme for our organization this year as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we kind of get going here. So let's dive in. So first thing I want to talk about is we definitely want to come up with some simple definitions. So we look at the word disability as a technical term. So that way we can kind of remove any stigma associated with it. You know, it's a disability is broadly defined as a condition or function judged to be significantly impaired relative to the usual standard of an individual or group. The term is used to refer to individual functioning, including physical, sensory, cognitive, intellectual, mental health, various types of chronic diseases. And so we'll just kind of talk about a little bit about disability versus disabled. We really want to focus on what the difference is between those. So disabled is really somebody who is unable to perform a major life activity. And I want to be clear about this, the difference between the two of them, because we kind of get confused in our language and out in the world, and we'll actually say, oh, this person is disabled, when in reality is they have a disability. So let's remember that all people who are disabled have a disability, but all people who have disability are definitely not disabled. They're able to work, they're able to manage their life, they're able to do lots of different things in life. And I wanted to be really clear on that definition up front. So as we move forward, you've probably seen the term disabled where they capitalize the A. That's because we've said somebody was disabled, like they weren't able to do things, they weren't able to work, and they were. And so they capitalize the A. So we don't use that term. We just talk about the difference between the two of them to make it really simple in that. So what is an invisible disability? Well, it's any physical, mental, or neurological condition not visible. Well, that's no duh. From the outside. Disabilities, chronic illness, chronic pain, addictions, phobias. I really call it the invisible nature of the illness. It's those symptoms that you can't see. Somebody may be in a wheelchair, you can see that, but they may have chronic pain or neuropathic pain, or they may have PTSD, or somebody may have, be in chronic pain, and from the outside, you can't see it, other than maybe it's impacting their mood, their face, their other things, because they're in chronic pain. So it's that invisible nature that we cannot see, that we don't understand. And so that's really, and of course, there's a million different diseases that that are part of that. And all your mental health stuff, like I said, things like MS and fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue and diabetes and Alzheimer's and a whole host of different things. So it's really a broad scope of areas. Um, but one of the biggest issues that you struggle with as a job seeker is that you look fine on the outside. You know, you can see it right here. We talk about "But You Look Good." We actually wrote, my wife and I wrote a book called "But You Look Good" back in 1998. Released it on Amazon many years later. We're getting ready to release the 25th anniversary edition of the book. But that's what people would say to my wife. My wife was, at the age of 27, was diagnosed with primary progressive multiple sclerosis. Um, and at 28 with Lyme disease from a tick bite. We can point back to 14 years before. Unable to work anymore. She had been an actress, model, multiple college degrees, getting ready to get her master's degree, and and boom, impacted, dramatically disabled by it. Um, but you wouldn't know by looking at her. And so people would always say that to her. They'd always say, well, but you look good, right? And so that became the name of the book because it's not about what we see on the outside. It's really the internal thing that impacts that. And sometimes we even mask our condition because of that. I think of even an example going to a doctor where people will get all dressed up to go to the doctor. And the doctor's like, oh, you're not sick. There's nothing wrong with you. When in reality is what they need to show up is, what are they at home? Well, in my wife's case, she'd probably show up in pajamas, right? And with her hair all tousled and everything. And those things that would show that but you look good. People aren't giving you necessarily a compliment on that. They're actually saying, you don't look sick. And so we want to kind of think about what that is as we start to learn this language of invisible disabilities. 27% of the adults in the US have a disability. 3 out of 5, which is 57%, have a chronic illness. 80% of those are invisible. You can't see from the outside necessarily just by sitting there with them that what they're living with is a disability. It's invisible. 80% of disabilities. In fact, if you think about the wheelchair, which is a small portion of this whole thing, it's less than 5% of the people use a wheelchair on a regular basis. So, but remember, so here's the key, you're part of a vast talent pool, right? So it's not abnormal to have a disability. It's actually, that's why we use the term invisible no more, which is our vision statement of our organization, is that somebody may have brown hair, they may be right-handed, they have Crohn's disease, they're from Indiana. If you think about those things, it's part of who they are. And it's the most uncommon people I say are people that run Ironman triathlons or people that climb Mount Everest, okay? Which is interesting because there are actually people with disabilities that have done both of those, right? And so, but that's the more abnormal is what I would say. But the majority of people live with a chronic illness or a phobia or could be an addiction, it could be anxiety, all those different things. So it's not the uncommonness, although we kind of think of that way in the workplace. It's not. So I'm going to use the term visible. We do a presentation called the 7 Realities of the Invisible Becoming Visible. And that's where we're going to kind of use that visible acrostic again is here. So V is for vast, and it's a global phenomenon, right? So it impacts everybody, as we talked about a little bit ago. It's the number one minority group in the world. This is people with disabilities, right? But the key is that having a chronic illness, what does it do and benefit you? How does it do in the workplace? Well, people who live with invisible disabilities or chronic illnesses, they're resilient. Oh my goodness. They're problem solvers. They're constantly having to solve, how do I do this? What do I do this? How do I, we think about people with dyslexia, which is a disability. You think about how people have to learn something differently. I think about my wife. One of her things she had was dyslexia, and she couldn't read, right? So she had to do book reports. So what did she do? She made up the whole story, like she wrote a book basically to do a book story on, right? Because she couldn't do it. She did find out in college that she actually ended up having a lazy eye, and she was able to put a friend showed her by putting a ruler on the line. She was able to read the whole thing and kind of work through that. But reading's still very difficult for her. Also, people with disabilities make great program managers. Their whole life is a program in a sense, right? It's literally structuring everything they need to do every day and what they do about that. So it's really vast that you're not alone, right? It's not just you against the world, which is great to know. And that's what we're here for, Invisible Disabilities Association. It's about that, to let you know that. So who in this picture has a disability, right? I mean, I could, we could raise our hand. We go, okay, we see, okay, there's a person in a wheelchair, right? Maybe someone with glasses. Um, we don't know. It could be everybody in this picture. In fact, which probably, at least 57% or more, right, that have a disability. I think about this picture. Well, same thing. Okay, I can't tell on a Zoom call. I mean, I don't even know if somebody's in a wheelchair on a Zoom call, right? You can't see what's going on. But somebody with glasses, okay, so they have a disability. But are they disabled by it? Not necessarily, right? So often we think of the term disability, we assume somebody's in a wheelchair, right? I mean, the universal symbol we think is a wheelchair, which really is a symbol for accessibility, not necessarily a symbol for disability. Um, as mentioned before, about 80% of Americans who live with a disability, they don't use an assistive device, right? And really to kind of expand, really, what we found is that we used to list all the disabilities on our website. We launched a website, by the way, in 1997, the year before Google went online. And we had 20,000 people a month came to the site because it was a window to the world. All of a sudden, the internet's a place where they're at home a lot of times. They're not able to interact. So it became this window to the world to them. But what happens is we used to list all these things on our website, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, and then we start getting into a lot of the rare diseases. We gave up after 600, and the reason why is it's because it's really these symptoms, as I mentioned before, fatigue, dizziness, pain, weakness, cognitive impairments. Sometimes they're debilitating, sometimes they're not. It could, and how do they occur from? It could be from chronic illness, it could be from chronic pain, it could be somebody was injured, it could be birth disorders. You know, you could be part of the group. Anybody can be part of the group, right? You may have a disability one time and later on you don't. It goes back and forth. Obviously, as we get older, we're more likely to get things, and that happens as well too. But the key is that you can't tell by looking at somebody. A employer cannot tell by looking at somebody unless you come in a wheelchair, right? They can't see. And so as a job seeker, we have to think through that. Okay, well, what do I do about that, right? So the next thing is it's really, they're invisible. And that's the I, that's the first I in the visible acrostic here. But it's called selective disclosure, right? What are you going to disclose? As we well know, there's no requirement to disclose when you're applying for a job that you have a disability. A lot of times they'll have a little form you fill out. My guess is I don't think very many people are going to check that form because they don't want people to think differently about them. But you can. There is a lot of jobs, there's a place you can say I have a disability. But the key is that when in the job, as you're applying for a job and you're starting to get into the interview stage, maybe are you going to want to disclose something, right? Something that will help them understand. Oh, maybe there's a simple accommodation I'm going to need to do, something along those lines. But the key is talk about how with just minor judgments you can achieve peak performance, right? What a cool thing. It's really showing how, and you hear this sometimes, people will talk about who are neuroinvisible and other things, that it's like my superpower, right? So what is this thing that you're going to disclose from a disability that's invisible, they don't know, and talk about how a simple accommodation is going to help with that. The S is about society, right? And it's really about understanding how society looks at things. We got to break the myth first that accommodations are expensive. They're usually not. And that, or especially the one that people with disabilities are less productive. And part of that is back to that whole issue of the disabled versus disability, right? Person who's disabled is unable to work. Well, person with a disability, a lot of times with a simple accommodation, they're absolutely able to do the job, or even more so, right? And so we need to think about what that is. Most accommodations don't cost anything, right? And so we'll kind of share a little bit about, what are some of those and what, if there's an accommodation that you can create, and there are accommodations that fall under the ADA, right? We'll talk a little bit about that. And some accommodations are just something that your company wants to do right by you, right? They want to do something as an accommodation to really help in that area. But think about the person driving slow in a slow lane. And as you pass them up on the highway, you'll look over. Why do you look over? Why are they driving slow? And what if they're like, oh, they're in their 30s? And you're like, well, why are they driving slow? You don't know if maybe it's difficult for them to drive because of their disability. Maybe fast motion, but they got to go places. They got to go to work. Um, or maybe it's the first time they've been out driving in a long time. They had to drive, right? We don't know what they're going through, and so we need to step back and not think about that aspect and focus on that. We need to focus on uh, not prejudging in that sense. Stepping back. I like to always say, learn that language, step back, take a moment before we say something. Those type of things. That's kind of breaking down that bias, right? We have this bias. Somebody has a disability, they can't work, or they're sick, they can't work. We make these decisions as like an employer would make the decision because of what they can or can't see. And somebody in a wheelchair may be able to do things, or they may not. Somebody who has an invisible disability may be able to do things that they may not. But guess who it's up to decide is that person. I can't, if I'm an employer, I can't make that decision for them. If I'm hiring them, they need to tell me what they can and can't do and what help they need. It's not up to me to make that decision. And I think so many times we employers try to make that decision by what they see or can't see. The next I, so we got V is vast, I is that it's invisible, S, society's perceptions of these things, I is that it's individual. And one of the things I want to say about that is every disability is unique. Everyone is unique. Um, so somebody with MS may be in a wheelchair, somebody in MS may not be in a wheelchair. Does a wheelchair necessarily mean one thing or the other? It doesn't necessarily mean. It just means they're unable to necessarily walk. But does that mean they can't work? No, you can't make that decision by what we see in that. If you think about things like the neuroinvisible, like in the autism talks about a spectrum, right? Well, that's because everybody falls on a spectrum. Every illness, disability, phobia, addiction falls on a spectrum. And what if you have multiple? What if you have MS and diabetes? Okay, they interact differently than somebody that has maybe Crohn's disease and PTSD, right? So they're all going to interact a little bit differently, and we need to look at them differently. And remember that it's this wide range. We also have to think about, you know, really as a job seeker, what is your energy envelope? How much can you do, right? You need to think about that ahead of time too at the job you're applying for. Is this a job that I can do, that I'm going to have enough energy to meet the qualifications of that job, right? It's going to be 8 hours sitting at a desk. Oh my goodness, can I do that, right? Those type of things. But you're going to be your own advocate. It's just like with a doctor, going to a doctor, you need to be your own advocate. You're the one who's the expert on it. And so I recommend that you take some time and put together the stuff, that says, hey, these are the things that I excel at. And maybe here's some simple accommodations that I might need to do those. Um, we're going from V-I-S-I-B. B is believe. But what is believe? It's not believe in you, which we do want to do. I want to believe in you. But it really is believing when somebody shares what they can or can't do. That's believing them. And if you're second guessing because what you know or what you think, then you're being prejudiced in that sense and you're having that bias. Um, Also, if you're living with it, it's looking at your own strengths and limitations and believing them or respecting them, kind of, taking inventory in yourself, saying, you know, um, this job requires me to be there at 7 a.m. every morning. 7 a.m. ain't gonna work, right? So two things. Is that 7 a.m. mean that's a job that is required to be at 7 and that's the only way they do 7? Or is that a job where maybe there's an accommodation that's available where the company can say, you know what? 7:30 is fine, but you're gonna have to work till 5:30 or whatever, versus, you're gonna have to make it up somewhere, right? Because we need you to work a full shift. So it's looking at that. It's also, get other people involved. A lot of companies have employee resource groups, right? Or affinity groups, or whatever they call them. You can look those up ahead of time even and find out if the company has those. And maybe even reach out through social media to them and find out how can I interact in that way and talk about those things. Remember, it's your experience and how you navigate these things, the tools you need to succeed. It's based upon you. But believing is both areas. It's the person who's hiring, it's the person who has the job seeker. You got to believe with what each person and have a good relationship there in a sense of doing that, right? Developing that good relationship. Part of believing is thinking about, let's just do a reminder about the American Disabilities Act. This is not a full primer on that. You can go read about it. It's a big thing, but An individual with a disability must be qualified to perform the essential functions of the job with or without a reasonable accommodation or to be protected by the ADA. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, that means that if the job requirements has an educational background requirement or some experience background or specific skills or licenses or any other standards, you have to have them if it's required for the job with or without a reasonable accommodation. So I'm going to say what a reasonable accommodation is. That's the key, right? Um, give an example. Unreasonable accommodation. You want to be a bus driver and you're visually impaired. And you tell the company, well, then you got to hire somebody to drive the bus for me, right? Well, that's not a reasonable accommodation, right? I mean, that's like an outrageously unreasonable accommodation. But what might be a reasonable accommodation? Well, think about this. The cubicle world, right? We got the cubicle world. A reasonable accommodation may be, hey, I deal with anxiety. Is there a way that I can not be in the middle of the cubicle farm, right? Or maybe you're taking a medicine because you need to be near a restroom, right? So that's a reasonable. There's no cost to the company to do that, right? To move you to a different place in the building. Um, it's about, we talked about even the time issues, right? It's looking at, can I slide my time? It takes me 3 hours every morning to get ready. Is there any way that I could come in at 8 versus 7? I'll work the extra hours to do that, right? But I can't do the 7 a.m., right? So those are accommodations that cost the company nothing. It's just a matter of them looking at that. I know that people talk about, well, I want to be able to work from home as my accommodation. Well, the question becomes, does the company have that particular job skill? Let's say it's an engineer one or whatever it is. Does the engineer one roles allow, does anybody ever get to work from home as an engineer one? Okay, because that's the key is, does the role ever have that as a regular thing? And if it does, then there may be an opportunity to have accommodation that maybe so many days a week you can work from home, something along those lines. But the key is that it has to be something that's part of the role. It may be a job that's where you're doing telephone service or something like that, where you're taking calls and you can do those from anywhere. And the company may say, yeah, we allow people to do that, right? But you got to be in the office 1 day a week or something. Is that something that you could do, right? Can you meet that qualification of being in the office 1 day a week as part of that role, right? So it's really working through those. And I find with companies that companies they want to do this, right? I mean, they want to have great people. And if you've got the skills in the background and you're presenting yourself well an interview, and they want to hire you. And this simple thing here is something that they can look at. In fact, to me, it becomes a positive thing in the sense of they're going, oh my goodness, this person loves this job, they care about this job, they want to do this job, and they know there's this little barrier maybe that we could easily overcome. And now we're going to strengthen that relationship between the employer and the job seeker. The last, then we've got, you go from B to L, which is love in action. It's something doing something. It's practical. It's uh, really respecting. It's setting limits, right? So it's setting the limits. It's getting the resources. It's being part of the community. It's doing something. Love in action is actually it's not just oh, I love you. It's more of what can I do to make a difference in your life, right? For one, remember this back to what we talked about before. You're not alone. There's probably lots of people within the company, depending outside the company, that actually may have something similar to where you're going through. So there may be an employee resource group specifically focused on that, or it's that relatability, understanding that it's not an abnormal thing. It's actually part of who we are, and it's what makes you up. So but it is a mutual responsibility. It's both of us doing it. It's, don't try to be a superhuman, right? A superhero, or Hercules or whatever. Sometimes you need to make sure that, hey, is this job I'm applying for, can I do this? Right? Because I do know some people that you would have no idea that they're dealing with disabilities or chronic illness or things. Because when you see them at work, they're just going, going, going. What you don't see is the 16 hours they're not at work, right? And they're just down for the count. So the question becomes, is that job worth being down for the count for 16 hours, right? Maybe there's a different job where you're going to be down for the count, not as much, right? Maybe it's not as demanding. So physically on you or emotionally or mentally or those things. So you need to look at those things as you're applying for jobs too. is this a job that I'm going to be able to be the rigors of that job, right? Um, in some cases, it might be, you're going to super excel at the job. You're going to do better than other people. Absolutely. So your disability is not necessarily a limiting factor. It's just a limiting factor on your energy levels. That's a big part of it in what you're looking at. And really, the E in visible is that it's everyone, right? It's up to all of us. I mean, it's everybody's different and everybody's unique. Disabilities are not equal or any of those things. Everybody, like I said earlier, anybody can have them. It's going to impact everybody differently. We need to think about that. And we're definitely when we work together, we create workplaces. Think about, you talk about a diversity in thought and mindset. When somebody is living with a disability, the amazing things they know, they learn, their insight, their creativeness, how to be creative on things. That's just amazing to me. And that's something that employers want. They want somebody that's like thinks out of the box because they're forced to think out of the box because of what their life is about. Um, but it really is, it's not just understanding, being the ill part of it or the disability. It's really that value. Everybody has value, right? Your disability should never be something we look down upon or lesser or unable, unless you're disabled, obviously, that's going to put you in an unable category in the sense. But that's up to that person to let us know, right, where you're at. So, yeah, so it's really that's the ease up to everyone. Here's some common workplace accommodations. Flexible start times we kind of talked about, compressed work weeks. Some people maybe can do 410s, and they need to take there's some jobs where it's like 2 hours, and that's the whole week, and then you get 4 days off, 5 days off. Maybe somebody can do that. They have enough energy to push through that, and then they rest up, right? I know some professional speakers that you would have no idea they're dealing with a disability, because when you see them do their TED talk and everything, and they're dynamic and they're going, and what you don't know is they rested up 3 days before and they rested up 4 days afterwards. You don't see that part, right? So that's a big part of it, and that's where the visible. It's about listening. Um, at Invisible Disabilities are, this is, by the way, this is our 30th anniversary this year in 2026, which were just amazing. And as our theme being I am invisible no more, our really pillars of the organization have been to encourage, educate, and connect, right? Um, Also, it's to listen, believe, and support. Take time to listen. That's develop that relationship. Believe what somebody says, as we talked about there, and then support if they need it, right? Sometimes they don't need any more support than you listening and believing them, right? Nothing's worse than having somebody who doesn't believe you. When you say I mean, I may look at somebody and go, there's no way they could do this job. I'm looking at them, but they show their experience, their education, their background, all these things. They're like, absolutely, they can do the job. So don't ever make a visual, do it auditory. Listen, 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 listen. I call listening is believing versus seeing is believing. Um, Flexible start times, compressed work, as we talked about, more work days, ergonomic chairs, ask for these things, bigger screens, low traffic areas, maybe you need to be in an office. I have people, because, COVID really, people found out, there are people that have immune deficiency disorders, but the company wants them in the office, right? I mean, that's part of the deal. So then maybe they need to have an actual office versus a cubicle, that type of thing. I will tell you that I work in an office, but I wear a mask. You're like, why do you wear a mask, Wayne? Well, I wear a mask because my wife has immune deficiency disorder. And when I'm out in public, I wear it so she doesn't get sick, right? And so I wear it every time I'm outside of my physical office to do that. Um, Written instructions, make sure that, there's noise canceling headphones, that can help with things like anxiety. Um, there's some people, the PTSD, so noise canceling headphones, some specialized software, maybe it's software that zooms up, or, I mean, there's AI is just amazing, all the cool things we're doing with AI. But maybe even, if you think about this with AI, it's rewriting it in somebody's a different tone, maybe. Give them instructions. Maybe they're not getting it. It's like, well, hey, let's try that. What would might work for you, right? So it's this total relationship. And then break times, naps, maybe Maybe the company you're looking at has a break room, or they have a nap room even. Maybe you need to put your head down on the table once in a while, right? So those are things that you can share that's going to be honest with the employer, that it's not something that's going to cost them any money. It's just going to bring a better relationship with you and them. So one of the things I want to talk a little bit about too is that what IDA's been doing is we created our goal is for our symbol to be the universal symbol for disabilities, and it's recognized around the world. It's a person, our little I person. It's a person with their arm around you. Some people say it's somebody breaking the tape. Some people say it's an angel. Some people, it's a person. It doesn't say wheelchair, no wheelchair. It's a person. And so one of the things we did is we created these invisible disability ID cards. It actually has your picture and stuff on the back. It gives you no special privileges. But what it does is it says it gives visibility to your disability if you want it to be that way, right? This could be something somebody could wear to an interview if they wanted to, and then people would say, "Well, what's that?" Well, I have an invisible disability, but through simple accommodations, I can rock this job, right? I can do this job, right? People wear it out in public, and when they go into a store or whatever, people, what's that for? Why? I just need some help. They don't need to know why you need help. They don't need to know what your specific disability is, because there are certain rules and regulations on what hiring people can even ask on stuff, right? So you can disclose, but it doesn't mean that they can't ask you, well, do you have a disability? In the initial interviews, there are certain regulations that they have to follow in the ADA. But this card is a great way to just bring visibility to that. And that's one of the cool things that we're really trying to do is to showcase this. What's really cool is that there's actually 3 states now, Alaska, Alaska, Utah, and Colorado, where this symbol can actually be on a driver's license or state ID. We think about Oregon. We actually had the bill in Oregon last year. It got to the end of the year, and of course, they had a million bills, so it didn't make it through. We had it in California a couple of years ago, same thing. So our goal is to do that nationwide and get it on a nationwide basis, so that would be actually on an actual government issued ID as well. So it brings even a little bit more legality to what you're dealing with, but it's voluntarily. You don't pull it out if you don't need help. It's just a way of bringing some visibility to it. I am invisible no more is really, together we are changing the way the world sees disabilities. Disabilities shouldn't be seen as negative. They shouldn't be seen as the person's lesser, any of those things. They should be seen as part of life. Like I said, it's back to um, somebody may be left-handed and blonde hair they, and they have Crohn's disease, right? Like I kind of mentioned earlier, right? It's part of who they are. It's part of what makes them unique. So I really want to kind of go jump into now. I want to introduce, and by the way, you can get more information on our website at invisibledisabilities.org. It's a great place to go. We have an amazing podcast you can follow at ida.fm. And we have, I don't know, a couple hundred videos on ida.tv, which is our YouTube channel. There are tons. We have pamphlets and books and, our But You Look Good book. We have lots of pamphlets on, we even have things like on how do you create a fragrance-free environment? People are like, well, how could people be bothered by fragrances? Well, it could be a problem in a workplace, and so those type of issues. So what I want to do is introduce, and I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here somewhere. Let me stop sharing here. There we go. And I'm going to introduce one of my board members here, Peter Hancock. And I wanted him to introduce himself a little bit. He came and joined us, and you'll understand why after he shares kind of a little bit about who he is. And then we're going to take some questions from you because we'd love to do that. So, Peter, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, and thank you, Wayne, and thank you everyone for joining. I know all of your time is valuable. Yes, as Wayne said, I'm on the board with IDA, and I've been part of this for a little over 3.5 years. It's the journey with IDA, and it's been an amazing journey. But my journey with my personal invisible disability started when I was born. I was born with lots of learning disabilities. I was diagnosed in first and second grade, and struggled heavily from elementary, middle, high school, and college of accommodations, but just constantly fought through it. And then you get to the real world and you still have to deal with life. It doesn't hide as much as you want to hide from it. And I always had the mentality, if you work harder, you just work around it. But unfortunately, you can't sustain that. So I have been in recruiting now over 20 years. I found that as a niche and that's why I want to be part of this discussion. I also chair a handful of workforce boards, some of the largest in the States, and really have helped redefine what policies and procedures are in the segment and try to lead by example. With my invisible disability, it's something I've noted. I actually went through the Colorado license to get that on my driver's license. So I try to be as an advocate for that. But I will also share that, as I said, I hid this. I was something heavily embarrassed with. I was shamed and bugged throughout my whole life. So coming out of sharing it was something I had to do my soul searching, and I figured the worst thing I could do was keep hiding it and not make it a topic that was not taboo. So I really wanted to help and really lead by example that you can be an executive, you can share these boards, you can help make change in the community with a lot of invisible disabilities. So I have enjoyed being part of it as much as it's uncomfortable for me still to talk about it. I'm excited to answer any questions because it's a lot of work I do behind the scene to help people with invisible disabilities and disabilities. So even within the state of Colorado, I help with the DVR Division of Vogue Rehab on their system. I'm familiar with that and um, love to help answer questions, but I appreciate everyone joining.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter, for joining us. So, Grace, if we've got some questions, I saw some people were asking about websites. I put a couple of the websites up there that they can find on the chat, but I'm sure you'll share a lot more on your page, I would guess so.
Absolutely. And I responded as well that we will be able to share this presentation with you after the event. And we're also recording, and we will have that posted up on our jobsnow.org website within a couple hours, hopefully. And so I'll send you an email once all that's done, and you will be able to review some of this great information that we've been given so far. I
And
don't
one of
have
the things I want to say about the presentation is I know people want the PowerPoint. I would recommend that you wait until Grace posts the video. And the reason why I say that is the slides are not going to give you a lot of the stuff we talked about, right? It's going to just give you a front page. So you really want to do is get the video when she posts that. That's something then you can share it out and keep it and those things. And we customize this video, this presentation specifically for what you guys are doing, because it's really important to us. I work in the corporate world in addition to invisible disabilities, and I'm involved in a bunch of the employee resource groups and live this stuff and really understand. So, yeah, I'd love to have some questions. So please feel free, come off your mute, and then ask away. We've got, I don't know, like 20 minutes here almost to take some of your questions. So.
nobody has
So
any questions?
I saw a question up here. Somebody put a question on
Okay.
dyslexia. Um, I will tell you that we did a series called Brain Ideas. So ideas, and you'll see a lot of this on our website, stands for Invisible Disabilities Education Awareness Support. It's what we call our educational series. There's a thing called Brain Ideas, and if you go to brainideas.org, or you can find it on our website, either way. There's a great resource. One of the speakers talked specifically on dyslexia. It was quite fascinating because they talk about it as that dyslexia is an auditory processing disorder versus a visual processing disorder. And this is an expert in that. They were the founding of Integrated Listening Systems company, and it was a MD, a doctor that talks about that. So great little videos, about 25 minutes. You can find that on our YouTube as well, or go to brainideas.org and you can locate that as one of the videos on there. So that'd be great to help with on talking about dyslexia. So my executive director, Jess Stainbrook, has dyslexia, and he's a film producer, right? And so he always talks about reading the scripts. Oh my goodness, he can write them, but reading them is where he really struggles on stuff. But he's he's got an Emmy, so he's obviously being able to find ways around it as well. So okay. Best place, can you talk through best practice for disclosing your disability during the job search? I'm a career coach and would love to know where I can find resources to support my clients with invisible disabilities. First thing is you need to know the ADA, right? You really need to know.
Wayne, this is the interpreter. Can you go back and read that question a little bit slower, please?
Yes, I will. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Can you talk through best practices for disclosing your disability during the job search process? I'm a career coach and would love to know where I can find resources to support my clients with invisible disabilities. So one of the things I would definitely say is most states have an ADA resource center. I would definitely take some courses on the ADA when it comes to the interviewing stage and those things, because there are certain things that they can ask and can't ask in a interview, and they're going to really help you understand when you want to disclose and not disclose. So as I mentioned, a lot of the jobs, especially jobs that have any kind of government aspect in them or corporations that do business with the government, they'll have a form that actually asks you during the hiring process, do you have a disability or not? Now, I'm always wondering if people actually ever fill that out, to be honest with you. Even if they were in a wheelchair, it'd be kind of obvious when they came into the, I'm not sure if they do or not. I'm not suggesting one way or the other on that. But that's the best thing I would do, is to really look at that so you know what the law says on that, and get some great resources. You can get educated in that as well. It'd probably be great for your practice, coaching practice as well, to understand those things. But that's the key, is once you move beyond the interview stage to actually an offer stage, my understanding is that's typically when you're going to really talk about accommodations and stuff, not in the original interview stage, right? So, Peter, you got any thoughts on that? You probably would know that better than I do.
It's still a confusing part, and I think it's a very hard part in our society still. So I don't have a black and white answer. The advice I give people, the same with disability as with any personal belief or thought too. If a company cannot recognize you for that as an asset instead of a non-asset, you have to say whatever want to work there. So I think you have to be willing to be true to who you are. And if they can't accept that or don't see that, it's not the right place for you, whether it's a personal situation or a disability.
Right. So as part of that, I would say is this is one of those things we're working where you're developing ahead of time. What are some accommodations would be helpful for me to do the specific job I'm trying to do, right? And actually have that maybe pre-prepared, right? So if somebody said, you're just like, hey, this is something that I live with, that impacts me. This is the simple thing that will do it, and it will excel at this role. Something along those lines, right? You're still trying to sell yourself, right? I mean, any job interview should be you're trying to sell that you're the person for the job, right? And so that's a good way to do that. And I think that honesty, I mean, as somebody who's high, people don't want to all of a sudden something pulled over their eyes, right? All of a sudden now we're going to throw something at them, right? Whoa, I had no idea. And oh my goodness, it's going to cost us, $10,000 to do that. Whoa, we weren't expecting that, right? Probably not going to be helpful. So great. I hope that helped, Ruth. I hope that was helpful for you.
Hey, Tiffany also has a question. Are
Okay.
there resources to help explain the difference between normal anxiety humans have versus someone of the many anxiety disabilities? In my experience, someone with generalized anxiety disorder is brushed off because everyone has anxiety. But I imagine the other anxiety disorders might feel the same.
Yeah, this is an interesting one because COVID really, I thought COVID was going to help us understand invisible disabilities better because I thought everybody's got anxiety, right? Everybody's going to have an invisible disability. Um, and what's happened is it's somewhat has been the opposite, right? We come out of this and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, everybody's anxious, right? I would say the reality is that if it's going to be chronic illness, like anxiety, something like, or mental health issue, um, in order to get an accommodation, one of the things they're going to require you to have is a doctor's note, right? You're going to have to get a doctor to sign. Now, by the way, it doesn't have to be a physician. There's a lot of times it can be a PA or somebody else that's a practitioner you work with. Somebody, maybe it's a therapist, whatever. But you're going to need to have something that says that this anxiety has a disability aspect to it. So it does, and I'm going to need an accommodation for it. Now, I have had people come to me because I lead the employee resource group at my company that I work for during the day, who had anxiety, and they wanted to have the ability to be able to work from home part-time during the week, like half days or something. The difficulty is for a company to decide, well, when are you anxious and not anxious? That's a very difficult one for them to work through, to create an accommodation for that. So the reality is that in order to make it separate from everybody's anxious, right? I was anxious about doing this presentation, right? I get a little anxious before I do it, right? That generalized anxiety, right? Is you're going to have a medical aspect to it to go along with it, just so people, which is tough too, right? To go get somebody to do that, but that's always a good thing to have, as well as that. So I hope that's helpful. But that's the only way you can really distinguish from the general stuff. So thanks, Tiffany. That's awesome.
Okay,
Okay,
we
I'm
do
going to read
have
the.
yeah, we have a couple more questions in the chat, but Marcus has his hand up, and I'm not too sure how long he's had his hand up. So maybe we will hear from Marcus first.
Okay, great.
Hi, thanks. My biggest challenge is really with job hunting, especially getting through complicated job applications. To a lesser extent, the searching itself, and also interviewing, but mostly it's getting through an application that is I find laborious, and the platforms I find very difficult to deal with.
So as I'm thinking through this, Marcus, I'm thinking about Peter, and I know Peter. I can see Peter shaking his hand. So what Peter does is he's a company, and there are other companies out there. So I'm not saying go to Peter's company necessarily, but there are companies out there that will. That's what they do, right? They're recruiting companies, and in some instances, you may need that help of a recruiter to be involved. Peter, your thoughts on that?
I agree. Utilize, there's so many recruiters are free for you. The Workforce Center has job app placement things. The DVR has free resources for you. And then also don't be afraid to use technology and ChatGPT to help get through applications that you may have a question with that may just need a little extra assistance to get you through it.
And you can actually
Hmm.
load an application, if it's a PDF or something, right, or even a link. You can load it right into a AI type tool and say, put this in common questions for me on a regular piece of paper, and it will pull all the stuff out in order for you. Then you can go through and answer it, on this piece of paper. Then you can go back and fill it into the application. So it's not just a bunch of boxes with a bunch of stuff, right? It's something that makes sense to you. Does that help, Marcus?
Yeah, I like that. I'll try that out.
Okay, awesome. I
Okay,
saw she's got her hand up too, so we'll take Leanne's.
Hi, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Good. Okay, I have some kind of dicey Wi-Fi here. So I actually have a question as an employer, and so I think this has been super helpful. And I'm just wondering when we start working with folks, we often ask a question about is there anything that you need from us? And I often feel that that's very vague, but I also feel sensitive to the other person. Because what I'm really asking is, do you need any accommodations from us? Is there anything that we should be aware of that would be helpful in your performing this job and at your best? And so I'm wondering, really, I'm looking to you, I guess, for some language guidance. So being clear enough, but polite at the same time.
Right. So a couple things here. One, I'm going to say I really recommend that companies, go through. We do a lot bigger presentation type of thing where we go deep dive for companies to really help them engage with that. But one of the things I would say is that you have an opportunity, in your language to, to you're right, softening it. So what? So we get so tied up on the language, right? Oh, it's got to be this way, that way. Be more specific. Share an example. Maybe share an example of something that you guys did an accommodation for one of your great employees or something. Something where it's like, also you may give an idea and like, oh no, now I got to give them an accommodation for something I wasn't planning on. Well, they've got to prove the accommodation in those things, but what's happening is the invisible no more, which is our vision statement that we would be invisible no more. That means we would treat everybody the same, right? We wouldn't treat people with disabilities differently. The problem is that we haven't made it safe for people to share about it. You think about it. Well, if it's 57% of the people have a chronic illness and 27% have a disability, and there's some crossover in there, right? But people feel not safe to share, right? Because it's interesting. It's the one thing that has all these little laws. There's ADA, there's HIPAA, there's all this kind of stuff. And so I think that it's relationship basis, comfortableness. Maybe it's the place of where that's given, right? Maybe it's more of a, coffee in the lunchroom conversation versus in the conference room desk or whatever. Maybe I think that by sharing, by understanding. I would love for companies to actually, have their executives who live with disabilities. And we do this a lot of times when we do the corporate one, is we get a couple executives who live with them to share. Um, for people to understand, it's common, it's not uncommon. And so I like to say our mission is probably going to go on for beyond my lifetime because of these things. But we hope we get more and more and more that people are willing to do that. So I hope that's helpful. Yeah, it is. Use AI to maybe come up with a different language, but the reality is that it. I think sharing some examples or some things and just being truthful, saying the word accommodation. I don't think there's anything that says you can't say the accommodation, right? You know, uh, is there any accommodations you need to do your job that we can help? Because remember, accommodations are not specifically always about disability. It could be a caregiver. It could be somebody needs an accommodation for a religious accommodation. There's a whole bunch of different reasons why you need accommodations, right? We know that there's all these different things that require accommodations. So I hope that would helpful.
Okay,
Oh,
so George has a question. What strategies do you recommend for job developers who struggle to reach the right hiring or HR contact when advocating for candidates with invisible disabilities?
well, Peter, I'm going to guess do you have some ideas on that?
Yes, I'm reading through that question. So, um, I think you're talking about job developers. I don't understand what job developers, what that
Oh,
person
creating
is.
probably creating what would the job description be that might
Is
attract?
that what they're saying? Okay.
That's what I'm guessing is that somebody wants to, you can,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was the one making the question. Thank you,
oh, there you
Wayne
go.
and Peter. And yeah, many times us representatives helping people with disability, because of the new modern hiring practices, we don't have the chance to really connect to the one that is going to understand disabilities, to the one that is going to hear the speech and be comfortable talking about this kind of situation. So hiring new job developers, job representatives, is one of the biggest struggles that they find, right? What to say and who to say it at the right moment, because again, now there are many filters until you get to the right person.
So one of the things I'm going to share is I mentioned "But You Look Good." Okay, that's our landmark book we wrote almost 30 years ago. It's used all around the world. It's a what to say and what not to say. It's a really good primer on understanding. It's got in there 9 things that are discouraging and 9 things that are encouraging. In fact, we actually, when we do a corporate presentation, we go through the 9 things that are encouraging as part of that. But it's a way for people to grasp because it's just a knowledge thing. It's a knowledge thing of understanding that one, uh, it's not a detriment, obviously, to have a disability, but and 80% are invisible. So there's all these things. It's about listening to the other person, validating them. So it's those 6 pillars of ours. It's encouraging, it's educating, it's connecting, right? Connecting. So connecting with other people that are in the field that you're talking about. It's also about that listening, believing, and supporting, right? So it is, I can understand, right? How do you find somebody that actually has empathy, right? Part of it is we spent a lot of years because of the ADA focused on people in wheelchairs. And the reason why I say this is what happened is wheelchairs was a very visible thing, the symbols of the wheelchair. And what we did is we said to people in wheelchairs, oh, you're disabled and you can't do anything. Well, okay, well, that's wrong, right? In Colorado, they can ski, you can do sled hockey, you can do rugby, you can work, you can go out on trails. I mean, a wheelchair is not necessarily the limiting factor, but our whole growing up in the HR world was based upon that thing. And what did those people say? I don't want to be your inspiration and I don't need your help. Okay, which is absolutely true. They don't need our help. They don't need it. Okay, people with invisible disabilities, which is this 80%, a lot of those people have chronic illness and things like that that physically impact them, and they need help. They need somebody to believe them. They need that. So trying to. It is a big switch. Let's just say for our society to, especially in the, I'm going to say this in the HR world, to make that switch to understand that you have to look at everybody uniquely because you may have somebody in a wheelchair who has PTSD and they need lots of help, right? So you can't just make an assumption, right? So trying to get to that point where people feel safe and those things, and that we're validating people that what they're going through is real, that they actually need an accommodation, even though they look like they don't. I think that anybody can be taught that if they appreciate people, right? So that, but you're right. Trying to find somebody that is a natural caregiver, right? That's in the sense of they believe people, right? That's the point. How do we get people to believe? And so that's why we exist as an organization. We're an unusual organization. We are strictly an awareness organization, right? We are about trying to get people to believe people that they have value, that they matter, right?
Okay, I have one more question, Wayne, in the chat here, and I
Okay.
believe it's Rosita is the name. I want to raise a discussion on the issue of some professional perspective. I'm in my 60s age-wise, and I feel that age almost qualifies as a disability. A resume goes out loaded with qualifications, but interviews never happen. I want to work, but I cannot ever get to the next step.
Yeah, I think that that's going to be a very similar type of thing where that type of role, you're going to need to work with some sort of job help or job recruiter, or as Peter was talking about, most states have a job group that you can go to within the state even and get help on that. And I think that that's going to be the key is, right. The problem is we all make assumptions, right? Uh, you know, and it's, man,
Can I
we
add one
all,
thing to it, Wayne?
yeah, go please.
And I do see that. So I see there's a lot of companies as the silver tsunami, we call it, retirees, people leaving the market, and how we bring talent in. And there's a lot of companies that are very much wanting people um, of all different ages. I will say that, and they actually appreciate older ages. Um, and there are groups of a lot of things called the 50 and Fabulous and 60 and Fabulous groups that help networking this that are age specific. Um, but I think any of that personal connection, even on the recruiting side, we are seeing more companies be flexible in trying to get people that are older into a workforce due to their maturity, professionalism, reliability, and skills that they are missing. So
It's interesting because my
we're
whole
seeing it,
team,
but it's something that you have to be persistent and show that, age is just a number, doesn't relevant, but I can still do this job.
well, the experience for me, that's a big part of it. The experience is so needed, right? And so, well, I appreciate this opportunity to be part of this. Um, we also have an online social network on the Inspire platform, Invisible Disabilities Community. You can find it through our site where there's, I don't know, like 10 or 12,000 people on there. It's a little bit different than like a Facebook or it's moderated. So, less likely to get chaotic stuff on there, but it's a great place to ask these questions too. There's people in the industry, they're living with the same stuff that you might be living with, and so that's another great opportunity. So, and we have lots of great stories from people over the years on our website too. So, thank you so much, Grace, for letting us be part of this. I'm so glad that you guys were all able to be here. And come see us, come follow us. We're all over social
Absolutely.
media everywhere.
Thank you so much, Wayne and Peter as well. We really appreciate that you've taken some time today to meet with us and answer some questions and, really share a lot of really great information. And as I said to everybody, thank you for, being a part of this because you guys showing up makes it happen as well. And I will be emailing everyone as soon as it's up on our website, and then you will get the power presentation with that email too. So it might be, as I say, an hour or two before that happens, but you will hear from me.
And I
So
want to say,
everybody just
Donna is a rock star. Thank you, Donna, for ASL interpreting for us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Donna. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.